These scientists all have one thing in common. They all research the brain and how what we know about it could be used in schools. They all have different passions and different ideas for how to change the school day. And they found that teachers are the people who can best use their ideas.
Teachers are the only professionals that on a daily basis are responsible for changing the structure and connectivity of the brain.
Some of their radical research has already been tested in the classroom.
You have to write a presentation which is radically different than anything else that you've done.
And some doesn't even seem relevant to education. Not all the scientists are agreed.
Any idea that you can have a neuroscientifically based educational program seems to me to be fantasy.
But this program is going to let them have their say. Monks Eton High School near Newcastle upon Tyne. It's exam time and something rather unusual is going on. These children are about to begin a revision lesson. But because of the latest neuroscientific research, the teaching is far from conventional.
So this first one, I just want you to totally focus on the screen and absorb as much of it as you can as I go through it. For about 10 minutes, I'll deliver a PowerPoint where they just sit and listen and absorb the information. LDL lipoproteins, they are bad for you, right? LDL is bad. After approximately 10 minutes, they'll stop and they'll do some physical activity for exactly 10 minutes to give the brain a chance to rest. So you're using another part of the brain, not the part you've just been using when you were learning.
These children are trialling what they call spaced learning, which uses 3 intensive blocks of teaching interspersed with activity breaks, all within a 1-hour lesson. It's based on our knowledge of how the brain works and what scientists call long-term potentiation. Memory scientist Terry Watson is our first scientist to have his say into how he thinks neuroscience can influence education. A researcher from the Open University, an expert in long-term potentiation, he's the brains behind what's going on at Monks Eton.
So supposing you've got 2 neurons, and this one is talking to this one. And what you do then is you put an electrode into this neuron, and you give it a brief burst of impulses. This neuron then responds in a particular way. It gives its own pattern of impulses.
They've discovered that the more the first neuron is stimulated, the stronger the response in the second neuron.
So the whole idea behind long-term potentiation is that you can maximally stimulate this particular neuron to alter the firing characteristics of this neuron. So in other words, you have some sets, 2 or 3 sets of stimulation with gaps in between, and you get a maximum response from the cells that you're interested in.
The problem is, long-term potentiation has only been shown to work in laboratory rats. This is where Monks Eton's head teacher, Paul Kelly, enters the story.
On a train journey back from London to Newcastle, I happened to pick up a copy of Scientific American. And in it was an article called Making Memories Stick. And I thought that would be really good in school. We could do with making memories stick.
Paul Kelly isn't what you might call a conventional head teacher. With his office in the middle of the library, he's happy to buck the conventional methods of teaching, and his starting point is the school timetable. This old Victorian school timetable is not so different from the school routine teachers and students follow today.
At the moment, we're at a crossroads between a timetable which has really been built 2,000 years ago in Roman days and a understanding by neuroscientists of the way that people really learn and how they develop best as human beings. And we're going to have to change.
Seeing how science might be able to reform his school timetable, Paul wasn't one to shy away. And the first thing he implemented, with the help of Terry Watson, was his spaced learning lessons.
Because it's a gas, it's going to affect how oxygen's carried in the blood. If you lack in vitamin D, you will get rickets. Nicotine is bad because it's addictive.
In all cases, those that received revision simply through the spaced learning technique did at least as well as the kids who were getting normal revision, and at least as well as the kids in the rest of the country.
After 10 minutes of learning, the children have their first break. It's at this point that the neuron connections that have been made during the learning develop.
Spaced learning is not easy. You have to construct a lesson fitting in with the scientific research, which is the 2 10-minute gaps and 3 repetitions with a degree of variation. And you have to write a presentation which is radically different than anything else that you've done and compresses an enormous amount of information into a very small period of time. So they have to be quite carefully crafted.
It's really hard to manage. You can't do it if you haven't got good classroom management. You have to be able to have them silent and be able to pull them very quickly and be back on what you're doing without letting it stop your train of thought.
The idea is that the breaks allow the reinforcement of the neurological connections made during learning.
What happens when we have learnt something? Soon afterwards, then all of the relevant connections are being reinforced, and you're giving those neurons the opportunity to do those things whilst doing something else. What that other task needs to be, we don't know. Playing basketball is one option because you're using a different part of the brain.
The children return from their 10-minute break, and Angela takes them through the same PowerPoint again. The theory is that the children will now remember more about the subject.
Receptors in the skin detect what's the start of the pathway? Stimulus, well done.
However, there are those within the scientific community that aren't as enthusiastic about changing education in such ways. Professor Stephen Rose from the Open University is one such scientist.
What we do know as neuroscientists is that in some animal experiments, in the sorts of learning experiments you do with animals, which is learning to run mazes or to avoid electric shocks or something of this sort, then if the animal is given a very quick set of repeated trials of the task and then given a consolidation period, and then is given the trials again, then they learn in a different way from if they're given the whole batch of trials all at the same time. But to extrapolate from that to saying this is a way you ought to be teaching children at school seems to me to be fundamentally irresponsible.
The ethos is first do no harm. We've got to make sure that all of the children who are participating in the spaced learning do not suffer as a consequence, and all of the evidence says that they do not. And from my looking at the data, it's looking extremely promising.
Right. Am I an animal? Yeah.
Back in our spaced learning lesson, the children have just finished their second break
We're going to go back to this for the last 10 minutes.
and are beginning their final section of learning, where they fill in a sheet, testing them on what they've remembered.
It's a way of learning for a particular purpose, and it has particular strengths. Should other schools try it? Should other schools test it? The answer is yes, very definitely.
It isn't constant learning, it's you have breaks from them, so you've got time to relax.
You're not sat in silence, just trying to read out of a textbook or something. It's more fun, it's interactive, so it's better.
It's good all round.
One of the reasons neuroscience could start to have an impact in schools is because we can now study the brain in much more detail.
Neuroscience is a hot topic at the moment because it is in many ways one of the last great frontiers in biology, and the new techniques that have become available from genetics, from molecular biology, from imaging have now made the brain accessible in a way that it's never been before.
One of these new techniques is called MRI scanning, or magnetic resonance imaging, which actually allows scientists to take a look inside the brain as it works. One man who knows all about MRI is our next scientist to think he can have an impact on schools in the future.
Well, MRI is a big, expensive machine. It's a huge magnet. I'm able to depict very fine-grained the structure of the brain. It's almost like a big microwave without the effect of heating, of course.
Bogdan is a researcher in what scientists now call brain plasticity, a concept which is showing students that academic success is in their own hands, or rather their own heads.
Brain plasticity. The idea behind it is that the brain is not a static structure, And when we learn something, both brain structure and function are changing.
What got Dr. Dragansky interested in the relationship between brain plasticity and learning was some research into a rather unique group of individuals. Research into the brain scans of London taxi drivers showed that a certain area of the brain was different from the norm. And this area related specifically to spatial skills and memory. To become a qualified taxi driver, a person must learn over 400 different routes in London, a feat of memory that is known as the knowledge. In drivers with the knowledge, this spatial area was found to contain many more neurological connections than in people without, suggesting for the first time that the ability to learn is directly associated with brain structure. What scientists didn't know is whether the drivers had this specialized developed area from birth, or whether it developed as they learned the knowledge. This is where Dr. Dragansky took over.
As we thought about some interesting and more funny way to motivate our subjects to learn something instead of just asking them to memorize some numbers or words, we decided for juggling, and they confirmed it was fun.
Dr. Dragansky and his team asked their subjects to learn to juggle for 3 months. Then they tracked the subject's brain structure as they learned.
This is the back of the brain, and exactly in this area, this is a higher visual area. Here again, another shot of the brain from the back. In these areas, we found the change, the expansion of the grey matter. The direct impact of our research was that it showed for the first time the structure of the brain is changing while training or learning something new. Even in a higher lifetime, in our 5th or 6th decade, while learning, the brain structure is changing. It means the brain plasticity is still ongoing.
This has big implications for what goes on in the classroom. Paul Howard-Jones is our next scientist to have his say. He's looking at how teachers can use this knowledge of brain plasticity.
The thing is that actually teachers are the only professionals that on a daily basis are responsible for changing the structure and connectivity of the brain. A lot of people see the brain as some sort of biological limit, if you like. I can't do it, it's my brain. That is really not the case. There's no reason why anything that we understand about the brain should limit achievement. Far from it. In actual fact, knowing about the brain and knowing about its plasticity can actually influence the learner's approach to their work and their self-concept. Another way of putting this is that biology is not destiny, and that's a really important message.
Is this something that could come into teaching in the future? Maybe schools could schedule lessons teaching children about this plasticity, letting them know there are no scientific limits to their learning. One effect the concept of a plastic brain structure has had is to dispel the popular myth that people's brains stop developing past a certain age, and that has opened up a whole world of possibilities for learners.
What's been happening in the last 15 years, I would say, is something entirely different. There's been a dialogue developing between neuroscience and education, and that is developing concepts that are educationally relevant and scientifically valid. And there's now a whole range of ideas which really should actually be considered now in schools.
The challenge is to transfer this from the laboratory to the classroom. Some teachers that are testing out some of the new ideas from neuroscience within the classroom is a group of ASTs in Gloucestershire, and they're starting to influence education in surprising ways.
It's just strange how the neuroscience just linked up so many parts of my life in so many different ways.
Sarah Shaw is part of a project run by our next scientist. Dr. Jonathan Sharples is so determined to get neuroscience into the classroom that he's inspired a group of ASTs to incorporate it into their teaching.
The AST project was set up along these lines to explore really what happens when we can bring some of these scientific insights and combine that with a group of teachers' expertise of learning. It was really exciting for us to see how these ideas could be taken and fed into what they were doing in terms of practice.
But how could neuroscience fit in with Sarah's specialism, teaching dance to primary children? Through Jonathan Sharples, it didn't take long for her to find a link. It's a method which develops what is known about kinesthetic learning by teaching a specific subject through dance.
I'm going to do about the water cycle. It's a really good one to teach as a sort of one-off. So, it's a hot, sunny day, and the water is beginning to get enough heat energy to leave the water and turn into water vapour and evaporate. We guys are going to evaporate. Off you go, find a space.
One of the things we talked around is the potential for using motor skills, so movement skills. Quite a large proportion of the brain that's responsible for coordinating movement. Not only that, but they're also very evolutionarily advanced. You know, they've had a huge amount of time to get very good at coordinating the movement of our bodies. And we just, you know, we were exploring this idea that could you incorporate movement and these motor regions of the brain in helping you embed concepts, in helping you deepen the representation of a particular concept.
The theory is that the children performing the water cycle, as well as studying this, will actually remember it better.
I love these guys at the front making these mountains. Can we have a real diagonal mountain? Although I've always been increasingly passionate about dance and how you can learn through it and how children can grow emotionally and physically through it, to actually know there's some science behind it as well, I think it gives it credibility, if you like.
And it's not only motor movement that is supposed to help embed the memories.
As well as actually doing the movement, as well as that motor learning, we also discussed the neuroscience behind just imagining doing that movement. And rather excitedly, I think neuroscience is showing that even as you just imagine doing a particular movement, that activates very, very similar and large proportions of the brain is actually doing that movement. There's some research that came out of Cleveland in Ohio that showed that you can increase the strength of your biceps by, I think it's 14% just by imagining it. So you know, don't go down the gym, just imagine going down the gym. You know.
So is this something that might be incorporated into a classroom based on neuroscience? Could we really see geography lessons being combined with dance?
These ideas are very different quite often to what's going on. That's why they may provide some hope in a way, because we need something different. But these issues need to be discussed very carefully. Those discussions need to involve scientists, they need to involve educators. So it's not just about sparkly, shiny baubles of science. It needs to be grounded very firmly in teachers' instincts and understanding as well.
But it does seem as though this is working and the children are remembering what they're taught.
A student from Worcester University came and did her dissertation, and we took 2 Year 3 classes, and one group learnt it sort of normally and one group just danced it. And when she tested them, the dancers knew it better, even though they hadn't written anything down.
We did do one in science, which was magnets. We had bits like where we had to go back and join them back, and then we went like that with our fingers together.
When you put two norths together, they don't go together.
Then that's the
bit.
We all sort of know you do things and you make things relevant to children and you engage their emotions and you visualise things. We knew all that, but to suddenly know what the science was, all of us at our own levels, in our own areas of expertise, realised we need to roll this out. We shouldn't be the keepers of the secret, if you like.
So we've heard about a school day using lessons broken down into 3 sections, and which introduces dance and movement at every opportunity. But Paul Howard-Jones is working on something so radical it could change the whole way children are taught in the classroom. And it's something that appeals to the very core of our being.
All of us are motivated towards a series of fundamental pleasures. Sex, food, novelty, gaming. All of those things engage a part of our brain called the reward system.
The reward system, when stimulated, is responsible for the production of a chemical in the brain which enhances motivation, called dopamine.
Uncertainty enhances that dopamine production again. So you're motivated towards a piece of cake, and you're going to find, there's an increase in dopamine in that part of the brain which is going to orientate you towards that cake. But if you're not quite sure if you're going to get the cake, that dopamine is going to be enhanced. If you know you're going to get the cake, you get a certain amount of dopamine. But if it's 50-50, then you're going to get the maximum hit. So uncertainty seems to enhance dopamine in that part of the brain, and it enhances our motivation towards that goal.
To test this in the classroom, Paul devised a computer-based quiz which, even when children got a question right, would deduct points at random.
Well, it's not calcium, we know that. Calcium.
Playing these games turned the classroom into a type of amusement arcade in terms of the environment. There was shouting and a lot of laughter and fun, but absolute maximum engagement with the task. And so that's when I think we first started realising that this concept of uncertainty is incredibly important to motivation, and it's something which has been completely ignored by education.
The uncertainty and risk-taking is something that Gloucestershire AST Sarah Shaw is trying to introduce into her teaching, and she's found a way to bring it into her lessons.
Now, as usual, I sort of know what I'm going to do, but don't know it all. I'm going to really hope that you will come in with ideas of ways that we can put the piece together.
By seemingly making it up as she goes along, the children think they are taking the risk. They seem to enjoy it.
Okay, right, so hang on. So we've got some people being the sun with material. Go on then. With material, we've got the waves.
When the sun comes out, we could evaporate.
Okay, that's cool. What else can we do?
Also for the sea, you could sway your arms around.
I think what any teacher can do is set up a situation where the children are taking risks. How should we do it? Shall we do this? Shall we do that? What are your thoughts? But the children know they're in a safe place. There are parameters to the task. I'm not just going to say this morning, go and make a dance up. I'm going to suggest techniques, I'm going to suggest questions. So they're taking risks, but within a fairly secure place.
So the scientists are telling us that their research could affect what goes on in the classroom. But what about the day as a whole? Could something even more radical be on the horizon? Back at Monk's Eaton in Newcastle, they're completely shifting the school day using new knowledge about children's circadian rhythms. The circadian rhythm is an internal body clock, which determines how alert and responsive a person is at different times of the day and changes with age.
We've known about circadian rhythms for some time. These are daily rhythms of about 24 hours, plus or minus 1 hour. And there seems to be some sort of internal clock. And we actually think that this exists in the suprachiasmatic nucleus, just about here in the hypothalamus.
What we've done is we've carried out research into all the circadian rhythms of all the students and created a model which might allow us to shift the times of the school day. We've created independent learning so we could have a core part of the day where all students were in the school, a beginning part of the day which was independent learning so that they could come if that particular rhythm suited them or the teachers, and then a later part of the day where they could do independent learning. And that package would actually allow for the whole range of circadian rhythms. And the upshot of it would be that the school day would shift, the 2-hour shift that the research across the world suggests is what's needed.
So in a school day dictated by neuroscience, we could see the classroom change radically. Shifted days, broken up lessons, dance, and computer games which seemingly punish the students, all things which science says could revolutionize the way children learn. But one change that is already happening is sparking anxious debate in the scientific and educational world. With new drugs on the market, such as Ritalin, which is used to improve attention, it's now conceivable that teachers could be handing out pills which help learning.
There was a study in the US where they looked at quite a large sample of American college students, and they found in this study that I think around about 16% of college students reported using Ritalin on a weekly basis.
But these new drugs raise plenty of ethical questions.
There are the questions around pressures and coercion, You know, if these practices become more and more regular, and would there become a pressure to take a particular cognitive enhancing drug in a particular situation? You know, if you're just about to have an exam or going to an exam, would you, and you're really trying to remember all your work, a particular cognitive enhancing drug that could improve aspects of memory, would you really feel that pressure to take that?
Some people would argue that it's unethical to take a drug to improve school performance any more than it's ethical to take a drug to improve athletic performance. On the other hand, people improve their school performance in all sorts of ways. Is it less ethical to take a drug than it is to have your parents pay for separate coaching, or to buy you a place at a private school rather than a state school?
Neuroscience can tell us what we could do, but it can't tell us what we should do. The moral debate needs to be very much involving educators.
A school day based on neuroscience could change the way lessons are taught. But how likely is it that all this could be taken up widely in schools? Should they even consider it at all?
I think we neuroscientists shouldn't actually sort of extrapolate our findings, and I think educationalists should listen to their own good sense and not listen to the scientists too much.
I feel cautiously optimistic. I think in the years to come, schools are going to look very different. Let's say 10 years' time, I think what schools are doing is going to be very different to what they're doing now, and a large part of that is going to be as a direct result of what we've learned about the brain.
This can be different. We can have a global movement of learners and educators and neuroscientists to find out what works and then help students learn in a better way. It's hard to step out of the box and challenge what's there, but it's going to be done, it is being done, and it will transform everything in due course.